Welcome back to RSA Broadcast Alley Security Weekly, coming back for our second micro interview of today. And today we are talking with Steve Turner, an analyst at security and risk analyst at Forrester Research. And Steve, welcome. Looks like you cover zero trust, which is, like most analysts have like a list of stuff they cover, but that's really enough, isn't it?
Yeah, it's certainly more than enough to kind of keep me busy. And like you said, a lot of analysts have a couple coverage areas. They just gave me the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's I love that we're talking about this because this has been one of my favorite rants in the last little bit. I still take a lot of briefings here. What I'm doing for Security Weekly Labs is I do product reviews of cybersecurity products, which is something I've been wanting to do since I was an analyst back at 451 Research. I always felt like it would be fun to get more hands-on with products. And I had two briefings in one day about a month ago. Neither of the vendors had anything to do with zero trust, and they were both just wearing out the term. And I think this happens with most buzzwords in InfoSec, where it kind of crosses a point where it becomes a metaphor. Because everybody's trying to use it. Like we gotta. All the marketers want to shoehorn it in, in some way. So that they can pick up some of that zero trust search traffic, I guess, on SEO. But at that point, it kind of damages the term for the industry, in my opinion. And people start to get really confused. I'd love to hear your take on that. And if we're at a point where we almost need a different term now, like how do you define zero trust, and how do we draw that line?
Yeah, so you and me both. I think we're both feeling kind of that, exhaustion from kind of the marketing noise and weeding through kind of to the reality of the situation, right? So just to kind of, level set things, Forrester looks at the definition of zero trust as a security model that only grants access to resources through continuous verification and enforcement that a session is secure, authenticated, and authorized. What you'll notice, like in that definition, is we're not calling out a specific technology or specific product that helps kind of realize that. And I think the problem is that, zero trust, as a concept was come up with almost over 10 years ago. So that's given kind of the marketing and the vendor communities a lot of time to kind of co-opt it and turn it into something that is going to sell more widgets, or it's going to, put more money in the bank for them at the end of the day, but not necessarily help folks who are kind of, ground level trying to implement this stuff. When we talk to a lot of organizations, especially myself, when we're talking to technology folks, zero trust makes sense to them, and we kind of have to level set that to weed through kind of all the noise that's been created. But when you talk to folks on the business side of things, zero trust means nothing to them. I think that the problem that we've seen and the thing that we've really tried to highlight is that in order for zero trust to make sense to folks on the business side of things, the folks that are trying to sell things for their organization to make money, they want to hear it in terms that don't even remotely come close. The terms that mean anything to them, or the objectives that mean anything to them that can be tied back to zero trust, are things like digital transformation or enabling their workforce to work from anywhere. Though that's how we see the language kind of go from this concept of zero trust into reality of what the business is trying to accomplish.
Digital transformation is another one of those, right? Where, I think for the first 2 years I was hearing it, I didn't really understand what people were talking about. I was like, is this, just going from paper to not paper? Didn't we already do that?
You say that, but having been, so right before I joined Forrester, I've been a practitioner my whole life, working at different enterprises, everything from like a waste energy company to financial services, for big insurers trying to make themselves into fintechs or, financial services type companies. And they never made those transitions from paper to digital. So I think there's a lot of companies out there that said that they had done that up front, whether they got rid of printers or they digitized some of their business. But in the background, all of that stuff was still happening on paper, or was still happening in the old ways that didn't translate to the way, a lot of modern consumers want to buy things or want to go and consume things. So I think when we think about digital transformation, it's something that's continuously happening. And it's something that as companies realize who they're actually trying to sell to, they understand that the paper processes they still have in the background or in the back office that are making things happen don't translate anymore. And as they're trying to attract talent to those same companies, a lot of the new talent or a lot of the folks coming straight out of college, they don't want to be messing with paper or some of the old legacy back office processes, and they want to be able to work however they want to work and be productive on whatever they want to use to be productive.
And it seems like there's definitely some opportunities for foot gunning with zero trust if you do it wrong. It requires so many changes across, infrastructure, how employees access resources or even customers access resources. Where do you even start with that? Do you start at do you build a big plan for the whole thing, or do you just add components one at a time? Or, do you see more companies going at it as more of a big project, trying to knock out a lot of it all at once?
So I think that's the biggest mistake that we see a lot of companies approach it, from, is they try to eat the entire elephant, is a very popular phrase that a lot of people use around this. They try to make this big overarching plan, and they say that they want to accomplish all of this all at once in the typical way that security has been deployed in the past, because all we had to worry about was the perimeter. But when you're worried about everything, you can't, eat the entire elephant, in order to make that happen. It's got to be, bits and pieces, and there's got to be lots of things hopefully happening at the same time. So the way that I see a lot of organizations back into this so that they're not overwhelmed, and so that they don't end up in a state of failure with these types of projects, is they have to take their existing business objectives and their existing business projects and tie that to what they want to get accomplished with zero trust. So for example, if they want to enable their entire workforce to work remotely from any device that they'd like to use, we know that we need to back into that with device security, with robust identity controls, multi-factor authentication. You've got all these different components of zero trust that you can back into the plans that you already have today in order to enable your workforce. So I say that the big thing is make your laundry list of things that you want to accomplish when you're moving towards zero trust, but have it be solving a business problem. Don't just say that I want to go to zero trust for the sake of going to zero trust and then build this overarching, crazy security architecture that's not based in reality of what your organization is trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember back when I was consulting, I was a PCI QSA, and the management at the consulting firm decided that we were going to use an online portal to manage all the evidence that you have to collect as a PCI QSA. And I mean, you've got screenshots, Excel spreadsheets, sample logs. You could easily have over 1,000 pieces of evidence. And introducing this portal, we still gathered the evidence the same way, and now we had to upload it into this portal, and the outcome was moving from Excel spreadsheets and file folders on a network share somewhere to this online portal. We had to add 20 hours to every project that we did just to be able to use the portal, because now we were one by one uploading these pieces of evidence to the requirement that they associated with. And for me, that's in my career, that's a classic example of just trying to shoehorn something in because it seems like a good idea, like you're moving forward, and ever since then, that's been my metric for a lot of products I've seen out there is, is this easier to do in Excel? Yeah, if so, you've done something wrong with your product. You need to go back to the drawing board with that product. Not so much with, you don't see that so much on the side that you deal with, but certainly like in vulnerability management and things like that, we often see cases where an Excel spreadsheet is sometimes easier than using some of these products.
Yeah, I mean, that is not a crazy anecdote that you kind of just said there, right? That's not just a security problem, even though the security world works out of spreadsheets, right? One instance that I ran into that was similar to this, and I recommend anybody who is a practitioner or a security leader in an organization, you should go and work with the folks day to day. Like go within the field, like if you work for a company that's like in the oil and gas sector or financial services or medical or any of that, go and live the life of an individual actually trying to get their job done. At one organization that I worked at, that was doing the waste to energy type thing, I went to a plant for an entire day to see what they were doing. And it was crazy how much duplicate time there was around data entry. There was a guy going around with a clipboard collecting different metrics off of different valves and different, things throughout the plant. And then he was entering it into a spreadsheet at the end of the day. And then that spreadsheet was uploaded to corporate, where they took the data from that spreadsheet and entered it into a master spreadsheet. How many hours of lost productivity happened because of that? How hard did we just make it on all of those individuals to get their job done? And the folks at the plant, complained to me endlessly that they were spending at least a quarter, if not half of their day in some instances, going around and doing this type of stuff. All for the sake of what? Like, because somebody's not listening to them and are understanding how they're actually getting their job done. And that's what you should be trying to solve as you move or transform to zero trust, is how are people trying to get their job done? And how can you secure, how they're trying to get their job done without getting in the way? I compare what we've done before as in the way security, and zero trust should be out of the way security until it needs to, kind of pop itself up in order to verify, somebody is who they say they are, or take action when some badness is happening.
And if I can recommend a book here, I think, I don't know if you've read The Goal, but I think that's the perfect book for getting your head where it needs to be when implementing a big change like this.
Yeah, so I haven't read The Goal, but I can definitely, definitely have to throw it on my list of things to read. But, having read even things like, taking it at a basic level, like the OKRs book that John Doerr put out, and kind of leaning into, what is kind of like the result of my actions and what, am I going to be measured against? I think that that's uber critical, again, to being very successful as you go down this path.
Yeah, it's often associated, that book, The Goal, with lean, and it uses manufacturing as an example. So that's what reminded me of it. You talking about that experience, because it starts off with a company that's having issues, and the Phoenix Project was actually based off of it, loosely. Like the idea behind the Phoenix Project was to write the goal, but for IT instead of for manufacturing processes.
That makes a whole lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's and so there's how many product categories do you cover as part of Zero Trust? Just out of curiosity.
So if I really had to take a stab at it, so obviously I'm covering the networking realm. I cover data security because that's kind of the center of, the framework that Forrester's put together. But I cover devices, workloads, I'm pretty much covering the entire gamut of security in every way, shape, or form, because every, basically security controller, having that overall visibility into things going on within an organization can come across literally every area of security. So I'd say at a bare minimum, it's maybe 6 to 8 different areas. But if you go into the nuances of it, it could double or triple kind of all of the different types of coverage that I need to lean into.
So let's walk through like a quick example of zero trust, like how that process goes, and maybe call out some of the categories there. Because you start with identity, right? Like identity is in authentication, authorization is a big piece of that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, so there's two fronts that you can kind of start this with. And we saw a lot of folks kind of started from the networking front last year when they were trying to deal with their VPNs kind of falling over and needing,
Right.
a real solution that would move kind of their on-prem network security controls into the cloud for scalability. But if we're starting from the identity front, which we see a lot of organizations do, having robust identity controls is ultra critical to building out the rest of the plan, right? So understanding who somebody is, so having, a single source of record that you're utilizing in order to understand who or what this type of identity is, and then understanding the context around that identity. So maybe location, other attributes of that identity, maybe their job role, what type of device they're coming from, and then ultimately, did they provide a second factor or another type of piece of authentication for you to fully verify that identity is who they're saying they are. That alone, we're covering the visibility side of things and the logging side of things. We're covering that identity IAM piece, which has multi-factor underneath it, risk-based authentication with some sort of conditional access behind it. And then ultimately the device posture. So is the device actually secured? Is it infected with something? Is it running my baseline security policies that I care about at the end of the day? So with all of that said, we've inadvertently covered 3 different areas. And then there's the network or the access that we're getting to the resources at the end of the day. Whether that's a zero trust edge solution, a ZTNA solution, kind of being factored into the mix there. And what's the health of that pipe that I'm using to get there? And then at the end of that chain is ultimately the application or workload that the person is trying to access. And we need to verify that is also secure, that has the appropriate logging and telemetry behind it. And, whether or not that person or that identity that we talked about in the beginning, whether that's supposed to be even accessing this application and what level of access do they have within that app. And we could think of about that as like Office 365, Salesforce, pick your choice of collaboration or CRM platform. But at the end of the day, kind of like walking through all of that, if the context changes in any of those areas, we should be taking action to either verify that the person accessing the resources is still who that they say that they are, or maybe their access has actually changed during this session, or the device type or network has become unsecure and we're going to restrict what they're allowed to even do at the end of the day. So it's all contextual and all continuously happening. But all, for the sake of, let's say, Bob trying to access Salesforce to put in some new customer records, or, Bob trying to access his email in order to go and email some new clients some new information.
I mean, it sounds like if you do this right, it's actually a net benefit in terms of visibility and control, right, for your assets and employees.
Absolutely. If you lean into all these areas, and you don't have to be ultra mature in any of those areas to get started, right? We talked about identity. Even if you introduced multi-factor to your organization, suddenly you have another point of visibility, another point of control to verify that somebody is who they say they are. But at the end of the day, maturing all of those areas gives you much more visibility around what's actually happening in your organization, beyond security. Maybe this is telemetry to let you know that more folks are utilizing this type of application during, these types of instances, so that you can lean into making those experiences better. So there's definitely employee experience benefits in addition to security benefits to get visibility and have more choke points and have those very, very precise reactions to when an incident happens. In the past, we would just nuke the bad guy, right? Whatever we convicted as the bad guy, and say, okay, done, we protected the enterprise. But in a zero trust architecture, it allows us to, for example, if Bob is accessing this thing from a new device and that device is compromised, or something around, his session doesn't look quite right, we have additional controls or additional types of actions we can take. We could restrict his access to the application so that he can't compromise anything, during his session, while we actually figure out truly what's going on, because of, the massive amount of visibility we now have and the precise controls that we have to go and take action. In a previous world, or a previous way of thinking about security, we would have just, cut off Bob's access completely and said, you know what, Bob, like you're insecure. And he may have been out, for multiple days, not being able to do any work. So, it definitely gives us a lot more
re-image his machine,
move his data. Like, exactly. And especially in this world where, the majority of us are still working remotely, you're talking in some instances. I talked to some people in the beginning of the pandemic, some of my peers, some of their employees were out for weeks, and they had the bare minimum because these organizations hadn't shifted their security posture to allow them to work from pretty much anything. So, re-imaging devices, is something that kind of not completely goes in the past, but, it's not, your first reaction to a security incident.
Yeah. Yeah. We used to have people physically put, PCs, like big beige boxes, in the mail to ship it back to us from remote offices for us to re-image. It was insane.
Adrian, it's still happening. So it's not in the past. Like a couple of my previous employers are still doing that because they're not doing anything to improve that. They just see that as the only way that they can accomplish, security within their organizations.
And it seems like this is bringing us closer to kind of something that's been a holy grail for me that I've been looking for almost 20 years. I started out doing incident response early in my career and stayed with that for most of my career as a practitioner. And all I wanted was a profile of an employee. Like we would get, something that would raise an alarm or an eyebrow or something like that. And I just want a profile of Bob, like show me all his devices, what IP addresses he normally comes in from. Is it normal for him to come in from a Pittsburgh Comcast address, for example? Just all on one page. Just what's normal for it? What applications does he normally access? Between what hours? Because you're manually piecing all that together. And it might take you an hour just to get all that together. And it seems like, we're well past the point where a product should be able to do that for you. And I still haven't seen it. So
I wholeheartedly agree with you, because that's something that I think us as security practitioners have done for a very long time, piecing together all of that relevant information. There's folks that just haven't delivered on it yet. That's still the holy grail, and that's still what folks are moving towards. And at Forrester, we kind of define that term, especially when we're talking about zero trust, as kind of a zero trust platform that's bringing together all of that relevant information in that holy grail single pane of glass where you can look up everything and understand kind of the context behind everything. I think as an industry are moving towards that, but there's still an insane amount of manual work that has to happen in order for us to have all the relevant context. we're seeing inadvertently with the XDR solutions, the true XDR solutions that are out there, that they're inadvertently providing that data because they understand that the more inputs that you're taking in, the better picture you have of whatever incident has occurred within your organization. But I think, plugging, everything that XDR is doing into Zero Trust and into those Zero Trust platforms will help us get closer to there. But I still think that we're still ways off from everybody providing that ultimate context, again, because organizations are still maturing all of the relevant capabilities and pillars underneath Zero Trust. And, vendors are still a far ways away from maturing all the technologies they need in order to do that.
I love that you said true XDR. I was chatting with Ali Mellon the other day about similar things around XDR.
Yeah, it's I'd say that term's so new, but it's been so quickly co-opted, just like Zero Trust, where folks pick your flavor. I mean, there's literally everything that people are talking about XDR and making it a thing. But, Ali and I, as colleagues, have had a lot of nuanced conversations around that. And true XDR solutions are doing what I mentioned earlier. And she's probably talked more about that than I'm able to do justice on.
Yeah, between Zero Trust, XDR, and, the MITRE ATT&CK framework, if you put in those keywords, they'll probably match a third of the emails in my inbox. So as we wrap up here, tell me a bit about the future of Zero Trust. Is there consolidation in the market that you can't wait to happen that'll make it maybe easier for people to adopt, or a Zero Trust 2.0 that you can't wait for? That, again, I would imagine it would have something to do with some consolidation, and maybe SASE was that consolidation. I don't know, but what's coming in the future for Zero Trust? Is it going to get easier to do as we go forward, or is it still expanding into more and more categories?
So I think that the future of Zero Trust is highly dependent on how quickly all of the capabilities and pillars underneath Zero Trust mature from a technology standpoint. I think that just to use one of the words that you had used or phrases that you had used earlier, I think the holy grail of Zero Trust is this one click button, approach to making an organization Zero Trust. Now, I don't think that that's possible in its current form because we don't have the technology nor the know-how to automatically analyze business processes and the way folks are working and plug that into our security.
I call that the customization tax. Yeah, that every company has.
Yeah, so it's like to be able to, if we were able to take all of that knowledge that's currently contained in people's heads of the way that we do business and plug that into the way that Zero Trust operates and automatically spit out a policy or spit out, the relevant technology capabilities that we need in order to secure what our organization is doing at the end of the day, that would be insanely magical. I think we're moving towards that because I think that more and more context continues to be added to the technology ecosystem. But I think the future of Zero Trust is where Zero Trust would be applied to everything all the time, whether we are a consumer or an organization or enterprise. And the way that we think about that is this idea of secure by default, right? If we had devices or things that we picked up daily, whether that's our smartphones or, our computers that we buy at the end of the day, and those things were secure by default and leaned into contextual security, we'd all be better off. So I think that the future of Zero Trust is going to lean more into taking in more of that context around those situations, but also is going to be very much rooted in what public policy does to drive, the technology companies that produce our products or the vendors that produce the things that we use every day to come out of the box secure and be measured against standards and public policy that establishes what secure looks like.
Was that a nod at the White House executive order there? Is that a little nod in that direction?
I think that's a good first step, but I think we have a very long way to go in order to move a lot more quickly towards what was laid out in that executive order.
I agree. All right, so that was excellent. Thank you for joining me, and Steve, I hope you enjoy the rest of your RSA. And Steve Turner, analyst at Forrester Research. And next, our third chat will be coming at you here in a couple of minutes, and that'll be back with Paul. So thank you again, Steve, for joining me. And this is Adrian from the RSA Broadcasting Alley.
Thank you so much for having me.